Hello everyone, welcome to astrologynewsreport.com. Today is March 9th, 2014.
Presenting an alternate view of world events as seen through the lens of Vedic astrology.
I'm Ron Berger.
And I'm David Anton Savage. Let's take a look at the week that was. Well, Mars retrograde certainly has delivered on its reputation of creating tension and pressure cooker effects. And Mars's conjunction with Rahu has definitely added a crazy demonic quality that is putting everyone on the edge of their seats.
As the week began, the situation in Ukraine ratcheted up with Russian troops taking up positions within Crimea, and tough talk coming from both sides. The tension was palpable.
By invading Crimea, Putin has raised the stakes to nearly intolerable levels. All that was necessary was for someone to start shooting.
The trick for the United States and Europe will be to convince Putin that he has entered into a game that he can't win, and that the costs of quitting now are more advantageous to him than in playing it all the way to the end. One can only hope that Putin, in whatever version of reality he's now in, recognizes this too.
But do not bank on Putin backing off. He's a tough cookie, and he has retrograde Mars, Rahu, and retrograde Saturn all in his first house of self. I do not imagine that he is in the best of moods right now, and getting in his face at this time can't be expected to win him over.
Speaking of reality, remember that Venus is now in Capricorn. That puts the planet of value and cost in the sign of practical reality. This planetary pattern manifested as a reality check for Russia when international financial markets fled from Russian investment, causing the Russian stock market to tank last Monday, and clobbering the value of the ruble, which is still going on, which forced Russia's central bank to dramatically increase interest rates. And lo and behold, the very next day, Putin backed off somewhat, and Russian troops have now pulled back from their positions on the Ukrainian border with Russia.
One of the significations of Rahu is that it represents confusion, and with Mars, the planet of action, going backwards, not only does this combination indicate moving backwards, it can be hard just figuring out what is going on, which was obvious from the conflicting reports throughout the week.
Also, actions initiated when Mars is retrograde often backfire, and Rahu adds another element of distortion. The rather swift reaction from the United States and the European Union, promising support for the otherwise very weak new Ukrainian regime, must have Putin wondering if maybe he overplayed his hand.
But then there's the problem of if you enforce sanctions on Russia, Russia can retaliate by cutting off the much-needed natural gas that it sells to Europe. So again, actions create a backfire. Ah, yes. Mars retrograde is like being between a rock and a hard place.
Or between a rock and Russia. Anyway, we aren't done yet. The next couple of weeks will offer more of the same, since Mars does not separate from Rahu until March 24th.
Well, here's a bit of nastiness for you folks. On Saturday, March 1st, a long-standing pressure cooker blew its top in a real savage way. 10 Uyghurs from Xinjiang province in northwest China pulled out long knives and meat cleavers on a crowded train platform in Kunming City, Yunnan province, and proceeded to butcher 29 people and injure over 140 others.
Actions done during Mars retrograde are also prone to backfire, in other words, to produce unpleasant consequences. An exiled Uyghur leader said on Tuesday that Chinese authorities are likely to further crack down on the rest of Xinjiang region after the bloody train station knife attack, which would then lead to further violence.
All I know is that there has been a great deal of hatred brewing for decades because of Han Chinese rulership over the province of Xinjiang. The Uyghurs are a Turkic people who practice Islam, and they feel quite threatened by Beijing's policy of shipping more and more Chinese into the region, just as they have done and have been doing to Tibet for decades. The Tibetans and the Uyghurs are now minorities within their own home regions, and to speak frankly, I think some of those people in those regions see it as a form of slow-motion genocide.
And just as we are putting together this issue of Astrology News Report, we've learned of yet another Mars retrograde plus Rahu event. A Malaysian Airlines Boeing 777 with 239 people on board, en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing on Saturday, has mysteriously vanished while over the ocean near Vietnam.
Functioning as a pressure cooker, Mars retrograde brings violent events and accidents. Rahu, besides being confusion and distortion, is the significator of espionage, sedition, assassination, and terrorism. This incident is mysterious because airliners, especially the 777, which has a near-perfect safety record, don't normally crash while 3 miles up in the air, and because when something does happen, the pilots normally have time to send out a distress signal, or the plane's automatic transponders report something. In this case, there was nothing. The plane just disappeared from the radar screens.
And another suspicious wrinkle. It has been discovered that 2 of the passengers had gotten on the plane using stolen passports. Since this was a plane carrying mostly Chinese citizens departing from a Muslim country, the worry is that the incident may be a follow-up terrorist act in line with the recent railway station attack.
Wow.
All right, so in the USA chart, the Mars retrograde Rahu combination is in the 11th house, the part of the chart that represents Congress. And so the frustration builds up, tempers flare, and things get a little bit over the top. A House committee hearing that was looking into the Internal Revenue Service's alleged targeting of conservative groups ended last Wednesday in a shouting match between the ranking Republican and Democrat on the panel, a sign of election year tension, which is building up in the nation's capital.
The House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, led by Representative Daryl Issa, the Republican from California, convened the committee to further interrogate former IRS official Lois Lerner. But after she invoked her right not to incriminate herself several times on Wednesday, Issa summarily gavelled the hearing to close, sparking an angry outburst from the top Democrat on the committee, Representative Elijah Cummings, Democrat of Maryland. Cummings was incensed after Issa asked a series of apparently damning questions. Cummings and his fellow Democrats were not allowed to respond, even to ask a procedural question.
All right, so Venus is transiting in Capricorn for nearly all of March. That puts the planet of value and worth in the sign of practical reality. Last week, Venus was receiving the exact square aspect from Mars, the planet of destruction, which is even more malefic when it is retrograde. All of this has had effects on the financial sector.
Last week, Radio Shack announced that it would be closing over 1,000 stores in the U.S., and Staples, likewise, announcing the closing of over 200 stores nationwide. Both retailers are suffering from the reality of less consumer demand and increased competition from internet sales.
Okay, and so we conclude this week's Review of the Week. Be sure to click in with us next week.